The exercise of the week is a hip lift or a hip thrust. I'm going to show you a couple different variations, especially because our experience has shown us that a lot of people actually don't feel this in their glutes and their hamstrings like they're supposed to. So I'm going to show you what we would call a baseline version of this exercise, and then I'll show you, if you're not feeling it in your glutes, some things you can do on the floor to build up or progress with your shoulders elevated on the bench, and then I'll show you how to really load this movement pattern if you're feeling it pretty well in your glutes, just body weight, and you're ready to add some weight to it. So you'll notice that I'm sitting on this gray box and I have a bench here. I'm going to pin myself against the edge of the bench. The size or the height of our benches are pretty high. So we've noticed that when people are not sitting on something and they're leaning against the bench, right now the bench is in the middle to the top of my shoulder blades, and it's a little too high for me. So if I sit on a box, a short box, or even a pad, one of these pads here, it elevates me a little bit. So now I've got myself on the edge of the bench in the right height. The edge of the bench is right below the bottom of my shoulder blades. In terms of my feet, I'm going to have my knees at about a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to pull my toes off the ground. The reason being is that if I drive down through my heels, I'll tend to use my posterior muscles, my glutes and my hamstrings, whereas sometimes when people have their feet flat, they tend to feel it more on the front of their legs and their quads. So we like to have people put their toes up. Now I want to pivot myself as I go up on the edge of the bench, and there's always going to be a straight line from my tailbone to the tip of my head. So you'll notice as I come up and down, I'm pivoting on my shoulder blades. I'm never arching or reaching through my back. The action of coming up is I'm thinking about driving down through my heels, and I'm noticing and paying attention to what I feel in my glutes, because my butt muscles are helping me extend my hips up. The biggest mistake we see is that people tend to arch through their back and they try and get as high as they can, but now I'm getting all that extension through my low back and not through my glutes. Okay, so at the top, I just simply look like a coffee table, and then I pivot on my shoulder blades to come down. Once you've got this down with 2 feet and it's feeling pretty good, your next option then is to load it. So we'll talk about how to load it first, and then if you're not feeling it in your glutes, I'll tell you how to adjust from there. In terms of loading, you have lots of options. You can grab a sandbag. So I have a sandbag here, and now I'm going to do the same thing with a sandbag. I'm adding some load to it. I can use dumbbells. So I only have one dumbbell here, which I'm just going to place it along the center of my hips. And I just come up and down, same motion, pushing through my heels, using my glutes to extend my hips. We have these sand bells, which are basically sandbags, just in a different shape. Same thing, driving the hips up using the glutes. And then the other way you can load it is to do what's called a seat belt setup, where you put your toes or your feet, the arches of your feet, through the band, and then you pull the band into your hips like a seat belt. And now as I come up, I've got some resistance with the band here. So if you don't have access to weights, you can use a band. Those are all the ways that you can load the hip thrust. The one way that I didn't show you that you're probably most familiar with is with a barbell across your hips with a hip thrust pad. Those are great if you want to load them really heavy. For the majority of our clients, we've actually found that, number one, they're really uncomfortable for a lot of people on their pelvis, especially with the clients that we work with who are on average over 50 years old. And then the second thing is that we can achieve weight in the movement without the barbell to a point that really challenges them. We don't need to load up the majority of the clients that we work with hundreds of pounds on the hip thrust. So if that's appropriate for you, you can use a barbell across your hips in the same way. Otherwise, you can stick with the loading patterns I showed you. Now, if you're doing these and you're feeling them in your back mostly, or you're just not noticing that your glutes are working, normally what we would do is have you come down to the ground and do them in a supine position on your back. So I'm going to have a pad here for my head. My toes are up, heels are down. I like to teach this as a two-step process. I like to have people put their hands on their hip bones, and there's going to be a natural curve in your low back here. So there's some space that I can reach my hands through. I like to work with people on tilting their pelvis back just slightly so I get more of a neutral spine. And then once I've achieved that pelvic position, then I have them drive down through their heels, maintaining that pelvic position, extend through their glutes as high as they can get their glutes without extending through their back, and then come down, relax. Rotate the pelvis back gently, drive through the heels, come up, pause, come down. This is a really great way to not only teach yourself or somebody some pelvic control, but also then put them in a position where there's almost, they're going to almost guaranteed feel it where they're supposed to in their glutes and their hamstrings. So rotate the pelvis, drive through the heels, lift the hips. Okay, so once they can do that version on the ground and they're consistently feeling their glutes, there's that connection there, then we would progress them back to the bench and see if we can achieve the same thing there. And that is a hip thrust or a hip lift.